Hey, this is Lisa, and if you want to catch up with me on Twitter, you can find me at ILTM Podcast. I'm also on Instagram at I Love That Movie Podcast, and we have a Patreon. The show is always free, but if you want to support us on there, you can. That's at patreon.com/. I Love That Movie. And if you like what you hear today, please subscribe and rate the show. It does help new listeners find us. When you do support us on Patreon, you get a weekly bonus episode of everything I'm watching that week. And just wanted to take a quick moment to thank a couple of my top patrons. They are Philip Barker, Michael Cross, and Josh Johnson. Thank you so much for keeping the lights on. And I will turn it over to my guest, a returning voice on the show. Say hi, Danny.
Hi, Danny. Hi, Lisa. This is Danny.
Hello. And Danny, if people have not heard you on the podcast before, could you introduce yourself just a bit?
Sure. I am primarily a writer, and that we'll be talking about that with this movie. And I was the co-founder and president of San Diego Filmmakers. I was on the board of directors of Scriptwriters Network, where I was in charge of their writers group and stage readings programs.
Wow.
I've written a novel. I've written books on screenwriting and so on and so forth. I've written some musicals and had them produced at the Hollywood Fringe Festival. So I've done quite a few things.
That's great. And yes, we've talked about quite a few movies, either musicals or involving music somehow
Yeah.
on the podcast before, but this movie is a little bit different. So
Mhm.
if you're just tuning in and you've never heard an episode before, I usually let my guests pick the movie. They almost always do. And so, Danny, what movie did you choose to talk about today?
This is a movie called Stuck in Love, and I'm not too sure how many people have even heard of it. It didn't play in that many theaters. I think it only played in like
Mm.
12 theaters, and they were all in Michigan.
Oh my gosh, that's a very small amount. I did not know that. I had not seen this movie before. If you're listening to this currently, I actually watched it on Tubi for free.
Uh-huh.
So that's one area you could see it. But Danny, how did you hear about this film?
Well, when I heard about it, it was actually called Writers, and I first read it as a screenplay before the movie even came out. And I was just enjoying it so much. I remember I was halfway through the script, and I actually tweeted, "I'm reading this script called Stuck in Love. I'm only on page 50, and it's already the one of the best screenplays I've ever read." And the writer director of the film actually saw the tweet and responded to it.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Uh,
Yeah, this was directed by and written by Josh Boone, who did The Fault in Our Stars.
right.
So it's
In
probably the
fact,
biggest one I can recall out of his repertoire, but yeah.
yeah, in fact, when he responded, he was on the set of Fault in Our Stars. They were just going into production on that, and he was a little confused because I referred to the script as "Stuck in Love," even though it was called Writers when it was written and when it was filmed. If you see any behind the scenes footage,
Oh,
you'll
wow.
see it on the slate. It still says Writers, and the chairs, the director's chairs, all say Writers. So he thought that I was mistaken. He said, "Do you mean The Fault in Our Stars?" And I didn't even know he was making that at the time because I had read the novel and I loved it. But I was not. That was how I found out that that movie was being made.
That's incredible. Well, what is the reason for the name change? Do you happen to know?
I think people don't really like movies about writers. They just assume that it's just going to be people sitting at a keyboard.
Yeah, or like, I don't know. I feel like writers get a bad rap almost
Yeah,
sometimes too. It's like, oh,
yeah.
it's gonna be about writers, it's like that's funny. But I feel like writers would be a much better title for this movie, in my opinion,
Yeah,
after
yeah. I think
watching
so
it.
too. But it is what it is.
Yeah, because it's kind of a like it's described as like a romantic drama, which yeah, it is romantic. It does have drama, but I feel almost like it leans more towards the drama. I don't know. What do you think?
It's it does have some of the formulaic beats of the rom-com as well, but it's hard to recognize that because it is three separate stories that are intertwined, and that's one of the things I like about it is that it's one of those kinds of movies where you have, instead of just a single main character who has a goal and goes on a journey, and there's a villain who's trying to stop him. This is one of those with multiple characters who each has their own story, and we go back and forth between them, but they are all interrelated. In this case, they're all members of the same family, and they're all novelists. But
Yeah.
other movies, of course, of that style would be Shortcuts or Magnolia,
Mhm.
Crash, American Graffiti, Dazed and Confused. You've seen, and I know you like Inyard too. So
Mhm.
his early movies were like that as well. Morris
Yeah.
Paris, 21 Grams.
So before we started recording, we were talking about, reading a script before you see the
Yes.
movie in
Thank
that
you for getting me
experience.
back to that. I tend
Oh,
to.
no, no, no. No, you're fine. But in how sometimes, like, you read a script, then you watch a movie. I think that's such an interesting way to do it because I'm just curious, like in this case, was the end product like the script to you, or did it read differently to you than
Well,
what you saw on screen?
it did. Well, first, let me explain why I was reading it. I'm actually part of a writers group, or more of a screenplay discussion group that meets once a month, and I've been in the group since 2009, and I haven't missed a single meeting.
Oh,
The
wow.
group has actually been in existence since 1981, and every month we read a script of a movie that has been produced. Rather than reading our own scripts and giving each other notes on our own writing, we read a script of a movie that's actually gotten made, but we read it before the movie comes out so that we can focus our discussion just on the writing, what's on the page, what's on the page, rather than being influenced by the performances and the music and the editing and the cinematography. And this was one of those scripts that I read for that group. It's called Storyboard Development Group is the name of the
Mm.
group, and they used to meet before COVID. They were meeting on the lot at 20th Century Fox,
Oh,
but
wow.
ever since COVID, we've been doing it on Zoom, which isn't as much fun as being there in person, but it does open it up to people all around the world. We have people zooming in from Spain and Mexico and
That's awesome.
Australia. Yeah, so it's open to the public, and it's not free though. But I did talk to the guy who runs the group, and he has offered a discount of 1/3 off for the single session if you use the code ILTM stuck.
Nice. Okay. That's awesome. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Danny. Thanks for plugging that. That's
sure.
a really cool opportunity. So, kinda circling back a little bit to
Right.
what you said at the top, I'm just curious, like, what is your impression of the film versus the script that you read?
Well, the first thing that's obvious is that they when they got the budget and the schedule, they could only afford to do 20 days of shooting, so they had to
Mm.
cut about 20 pages out of the script. The script is 115 pages, and the movie is, I think, 90 minutes. And
Yeah, it's
it's not
short.
always, yeah, it's not always exactly the rule of thumb is usually a minute per page.
Oh,
So
okay.
a 3.5 hour movie like Killers of the Flower Moon is like 200 and something pages. We read that script last month
Oh,
in your group,
nice.
so I know exactly how long that is.
I will
But
say that this movie kind of felt like, almost like a made for TV film.
mhm.
Like, it felt
Yeah, and
shorter, the world felt smaller to me somehow in the movie.
it
Yeah.
is, yeah, it is, and it's funny because yeah, they had to cut so much, and they were also on a very fast-paced schedule. Like they were shooting an average of 7 pages a day, and the director says in the commentary that that is the typical rate you would do for a TV movie or TV show. For movies, you're not usually getting seven; you're getting maybe 2 pages a day. So it does, yeah,
The world feels a little bit smaller. Yeah, but
yeah.
it has a very stacked cast, though.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did you wanna talk a little bit about the cast, or where should we go from here?
Um,
What do you wanna focus on?
we can do that, but I could let me tell you something else.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I was a few years after this came out, I was writing a column for a screenwriting website that doesn't exist anymore. They were called Five Sprockets, and the editor actually asked me at one point to make my articles a little bit more personal, and I wrote
Mhm.
one about Stuck in Love, and it was basically five lines that stood out to me and what those lines meant to me, and also what
Oh,
what I
wow.
got out of them out of writing. So we can go through those, and that'll get us through a lot of this.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that sounds really
Yeah.
cool. Let's do that.
The first one was actually the first line of the movie, which actually is written on the screen. We hear it in voiceover, so it's Rusty. Oh, do you want to give your usual spiel about spoilers?
Oh, yes, good point. We haven't even done the summary yet. So,
Oh, that's right.
if
We
you
could go. We could do that
we could do
first.
that first. So, if this is your first time listening, I don't really do a spoiler-free than a spoiler-filled. We're just gonna talk about all of it just because I think it's just too much. We might accidentally let something slip, and we're really here to discuss the movie. So the idea is that you've probably seen it already. Like I mentioned before, you can watch it on Tubi for free. But if you're still with us, I have honestly just a pretty quick sentence. It's really about an acclaimed writer, his ex-wife, and their teenage children who come to terms with the complexities of love in all its forms over the course rather of one tumultuous year. So the time frame in the movie is about a year, and it's about a family and just all these different complex things that are happening in their life, like loosely related to love and also writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. You came up with a good log line for that, and that's you know all those movies that I mentioned before that are these multi-character, multi-threaded stories. They're hard to get made because
Yeah.
they're hard to describe. They're hard to pitch. They're hard to explain in a line like you just did. They're
Well, I had some
and
help from Wikipedia, but thank
Okay.
you.
And they're also hard to get, some people just don't like that type of movie. They don't like having to keep track of multiple stories and bouncing
Yeah.
back and forth. So, and they don't make a lot of money traditionally. So it's very, very hard for a movie to get made. And I know this because my first script that I sold, it never got made, but that I sold
Oh,
actually was the same style, the same format of four different women, and it all takes place in one night, like Dazed and Confused or American Graffiti. But we go back and forth between these four characters' stories, and they intersect. And
that's
one of them,
interesting.
yeah, and one of them is very much like the Kate and Rusty storyline. I mean, it's not
Mm.
the storyline so much as the dynamic between Rusty being this kind of straight-laced, dorky kid, and the girl that's not, I wouldn't say out of his league, but she's in a different world from him, and she has a different idea of fun, and he's attracted to her initially by her looks, but for him it's just superficial, I think.
Yeah.
And
It
for
it yeah, go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
sorry.
No,
No, it
you
it reminds me of, what was that show called, that really dark teenage show, 13 something, I don't know,
Oh,
13
13 Reasons?
13 Reasons, yeah, it
Yeah.
kinda reminded me of that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking and I was thinking about it when I was watching it anyway, but
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah. So, uh, where was I?
You talked a little bit about, so we talked about the different perspectives in the film,
Yeah.
and I think what makes this one easier to follow than a lot of other examples that you listed are they're all in the same family. So even though,
Yes.
they're different
Yeah,
perspectives, they're woven together more tightly, I think, than in some
yeah,
other
and sometimes I don't know if you've seen Playing by Heart, but that's an
Mm-mm.
example where the what the connection is between the different stories isn't revealed until the very, very end. That's the big surprise. It's like,
Oh.
oh, that's how they connect. And this movie doesn't try to do that. And the NER2 movies, they also play with time. So the different stories take place in slightly different timelines and overlap.
Oh,
And this
interesting.
movie doesn't try to do that either. It's very straightforward. We know right from the start, it's three characters. We meet each one of them individually with one line, their first line of dialogue or voiceover, and it's written in text on the screen like a meme. And that just tells us, okay, this is the one character and he's going to have the story, this is another character, she's going to have the story, and so on. So and my script did that. It was called Weston Five, did the exact same thing. I wrote it long before Stuck in Love, but it did the same thing. I had each character very distinctly introduced with something coming up on the screen to say, okay, these are the four characters. Now I can spread out and show you their days. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I love this kind of movie, and that's the first thing I liked about it. But then I really related, of course, to the Rusty and Kate story, and that's how the movie starts out. The very first line is he's sitting in class, he's staring at her, he's got a big old crush on her. Everybody can relate to that, I think.
Yeah.
And he says, "I remember that it hurt. Looking at her hurt." And this comes back later on when his father, Bill, is reading in his journal, and he says,
Yeah.
"That line jumped out at me. If that was your opening line of a book, you'd have your reader hooked." And this is something that I noticed that probably most of the movies that I've chosen to talk about on this show have all been ones that have real strong openings that hook me in right
Mhm.
from the beginning. I find that if the beginning meanders for 10 minutes, just kind of sort of setting up how ordinary the character is or whatever, like I lose interest real fast. I need something
Yeah.
to pull me in. And you know, relating to this kid with this crush on this girl that he can't, this unattainable girl, it, that's something that I know, you know.
Yeah, we've all had unrequited crushes for sure, so that makes sense.
Absolutely. So yeah, and I always think about that as far as the openings of movies, the openings of books, and it's so important for writers again to understand that when they're writing something that you really have to pull the writer in or the viewer, the audience in. Um, the second line that stood out. Oh, so it's kind of in the same lines. There's one point where they're exchanging gifts.
Mhm.
Um, and he gives her the Stephen King book and he's getting all excited about, oh, you're going to love this book. And she says, you're really cute when you get worked up about books. And and that's something that I notice in a lot of different ways. First of all, when I was a Scriptwriters Network, we also taught a pitch workshop, a boot camp for the when you're trying to sell your script in Hollywood, they have these pitch festivals. You pay a
Mhm.
lot of money and you get a chance to sit in front of different low level production executives from different studios, production companies, and you get 5 minutes to pitch them on your story. Well, the night before that, you can part of these pitch festivals, we put on this pitch workshop where you can practice and get pointers and stuff.
Oh.
And one of the things I learned from doing those sessions and being sitting down and listening to the people pitch their stuff to me was if you come in with just a written synopsis and you're reading it or you've memorized it, there's no life to it. It bores the listener.
Mhm.
But the people who really love their story, they're telling it to you the way they would tell a friend about a movie that they just saw the other night that they loved. They're just very excited and animated, and it excitement and that kind of excitement is contagious, and that's
Yes.
what gets people to say, "Oh wow, I want to read that. You made it sound good."
Right, it's almost like you're selling a feeling or an
Mhm.
experience,
Yeah,
and not
because
just what's written on the page, like you said.
exactly. You're not selling the story because these story executives have heard every story before. Like I
Mhm.
said, my script has similarities to this script. It's got to be how you sell it,
Yeah.
and that's what I took out of that line. Let's see. I also noticed, by the way, um, when I like, for instance, if I'm on this podcast,
Yeah.
I tend to talk pretty fast when I get to a part that I'm really, really excited about, and I worry
Just a
because
natural, like, energy to it. Yeah, that
I
makes
do.
sense.
I hear it in myself. I get more excited. I listen to podcasts at the faster speed. I use the feature where you can speed things up,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and I worry that if people do that when I'm on, They're gonna have to slow
It'll
it
be too
down because I
fast.
start talking too fast.
That's
So I
funny.
try to slow down, and then I get to a part where, "Oh, remember this scene?" And I get really excited. So to anybody who's listening to this and they have to slow it down because I'm talking too fast, I apologize.
That's
But
too
I
funny.
don't really apologize because it's a good thing when you get excited about what you're talking about.
I agree. And when you're sharing something that you enjoy with someone else,
Mhm,
whether it's in a pitch setting or not, it's like you said, it's the enthusiasm I think that hooks people.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. The next line I really liked was, when, the daughter Samantha is, complaining to the father is complaining that she didn't use the first book that he had helped her with. He gave her notes on a
Yes.
book, and she said, she was grateful for it, but then she went ahead and did a different book, and he's pissed off. And she explains, in the beach scene, she says, "It didn't seem like my book anymore. It felt like someone else's." And this is true for writers. If like I said, I was in charge of the writers group program for Scriptwriters Network,
Mhm.
and when when you're giving notes to somebody on their writing, and it's very personal to people, what they've written, they're burying their soul in whatever they've written, and it's important to try to understand whether if you have to figure it out yourself or try to or just ask them to understand what was their intention, and then give them notes that help them accomplish that.
Mhm.
Try to help them. Okay, this is oh, if that's what you were trying to do. This is what you need to get at. And what happens with other writers giving notes to writers is they tend to think in terms of, well, this is how I would write it, and then it doesn't
Exactly.
become their
Not in their
work anymore.
voice.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
always recommend a book to my writers groups. It's called Toxic Feedback by Joni Cole, and it talks all about that. So
Mm.
all about how important it is to to because you can really derail somebody's whole ambitions about writing if you're if you're just saying, well, it's got to be like this, and it's because that's really not the way it has to be. You know.
Yeah. But I feel like the character Bill has issues with that, right? Like he loves his children obviously,
Mhm.
and he has Samantha and Rusty keep these journals to foster their writing.
Right.
But Erica, his ex-wife, and her husband,
Mm,
her husband makes a comment later in the movie about how he thought it was a little weird that he
right.
had them do that, and the son gets very defensive about it. The son is
Yeah.
very much on his dad's side, but I don't think he sees how stuck Bill is. And I kind of read that scene with Samantha as like another reason why she didn't really like working with him on that book is like you said, it wasn't really in her voice anymore. And then also I think he wasn't really in the position to create anything new. Like he was
Yeah.
stuck. And so that was it was almost like he was using Samantha, like, "Let's use your book so that I can still be creative, but have, like, that kind of, I don't know, wall or barrier up," and it wasn't working.
Right, because he says later on that he's a great rewriter.
Mhm,
And he tells Rusty, go out and have some experiences so you'll have something to write about. And I think when his wife left him, that left so much of his life empty, and that's why he hasn't been
mhm.
able to write new stuff. Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. I
And
mean, the other
Samantha, by the way, is played by Lily Collins. Just wanted to
yes,
point that
I
out.
did want to
Mhm.
mention that's exactly what I was going to talk about next
Oh, yeah, go for it.
because I think I read this somewhere that that you know who her father is, right?
No.
Yeah, her father is Phil Collins from Genesis.
What?
Yeah.
I did not know that. I mean, Lily Collins sounds like just a, generic
Exactly.
name. I would have never thought she was Phil Collins' daughter. That's
Exactly, yeah,
crazy.
I had never seen her before this movie. I've seen her in some
Wow,
things
she's
since
so
then.
popular now.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. And I'm pretty sure I read this somewhere because it's in my little article that I was telling you about on Five Sprockets.
Mhm,
That she probably sings really well, but she made a conscious choice not to go into acting so that she wouldn't be Phil Collins's daughter. She wouldn't constantly be compared, with her music. I think I read that somewhere. I don't know if it's true.
I mean, it makes sense, like, when you look up about her, it's not the first thing listed. It
Yeah.
says Lily Jane Collins, British American actress born in Guildford, raised in Los Angeles. Collins began performing, da da, and you have to, like, kinda scroll down to see who her parents are, and it's like,
Yeah.
"Whoa." Yeah, did not know
Exactly.
that. Wow. Wow, well, she's done a good job of, I think
Yeah.
maybe one of the most famous things she's been in is, like, The Mortal Instruments, and isn't she that
Right.
in that Emily in Paris and
Mhm.
a lot of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
wow.
I mean, she probably has a lot of fans who haven't even heard of Phil Collins.
Oh, yeah, especially
There
depending on their age, I mean.
yeah, there are videos on YouTube, I looked them up, of millennials listening to "In the Air Tonight" for the first time. That's pretty funny.
What? Okay. I think that's pretty shameful. As a millennial, I'm gonna have to say, like, by now you should have heard that song.
Yeah.
But it's funny the way TikTok has made so much music current again that,
Uh-huh.
that came out so long ago, but, oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Um, well, so let me go to so there is a line that was one of the ones in my article. "I'm not a great writer, I'm a great rewriter." And
Mm.
I get that too. In fact, the script that I told you about that never got made. There was another script that I got hired to rewrite somebody else's work, and that got greenlit. It still didn't get made, but it was for different reasons. But uh, uh, it was so much more refreshing to be able to take something that the studio already liked. I knew that I didn't have to sell them on the idea. I just had to polish it and make it presentable to attract actors, and we
Yeah.
did. We actually got an Oscar-winning actor attached to it, but then it fell
Wow. Ugh.
apart.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but it's fun. I wish I could get more rewrite assignments like that, because it is pretty fun, and it's not as scary and dangerous as going out there with your own stuff. But
It's it
so,
seemed like with Bill's character, he had a theme of, like, being afraid to do things,
yeah.
and that plays into, like, his fears around his writing a little bit.
Yeah, well, what's really interesting about it is that line, "I'm not a great writer, I'm a great rewriter," that came from a rewrite, that wasn't in the original script, and,
Oh, so a little bit of self-insertion, I
and
guess.
Greg in rehearsals, Greg Kinnear himself came up with that line, well, that concept of it, and then, Josh Boone went, back to his hotel and rewrote the scene, and they shot it the next day, I guess.
Yeah.
But I was telling you before how they had to cut a lot of pages, and I don't think I ever got back to, is it different? Was the script very different from the movie? I don't think it was tonally, but um, in addition to cutting a lot of pages, they also the mother Erica, played by Jennifer Connelly, she was not in the script that much as she is
Mm.
in the finished film. And
Oh.
once they cast somebody of the caliber of Jennifer Connelly, they're like, "Oh,
Yeah,
well,
you gotta have her.
we have to do something more with that." And she came in with the ideas because she also was, there wasn't enough on the page for her to figure out what her character was all about, and so she came in with ideas. Well, maybe she should be here, she should be there, and like the first scene or the second scene she's in, the first scene where she's goes to Bill's house and complain about Samantha not talking to her. Originally in the script, that was all on the phone,
Mm.
and it's written mostly the same, but getting her in the room was very important because they get to work off of each other, and they do it really well. I think they'd been in another movie together before.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting, yeah. I recognized, Greg Kinnear's face, but I had to look
Oh.
at his IMDb to, like, really see who he was, to be honest.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, we can talk about him for a second because my
Yeah.
I first saw him on a show called Talk Soup on E Entertainment. Remember that?
Oh,
Which was
I
kinda like, do you remember the
oh,
show?
yes,
Yeah.
I do, with, what's his name? Joel McHale, right? Talk
Yeah,
Soup?
so I
Yeah.
think Greg Kinnear was the first host, and then it was
Oh,
Aisha Tyler, was the second host, and then they got, the guy that you just said. I can't remember his name
yeah,
already.
Joel McHale. He's the
But
one that he did it for a long time, yeah.
yeah, and I remember though that when Greg Kinnear first started showing up in real movies, I'm like, the Talk Soup guy is nominated for an Oscar because he was in As Good as It Gets, and he was nominated for an
Yeah,
Oscar for that.
and
And
he's
he's
in Little Miss Sunshine too,
Little Miss
I
Sunshine. He's
think
done a lot of
yeah.
great movies.
Yeah.
He did a movie called Autofocus where he played
Mhm.
Bob Crane, the star of Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, I've never
That's not one
seen
of
that.
the. That's a funny one.
Oh. Yeah, he was just one of those people that I recognize. Now, Jennifer Connelly obviously needs no introduction, like,
Right,
we've
right.
talked about her movies a few times on the show, but, I think her and Lily Collins, I mean, they do kind of look a
Oh
little
yeah,
bit
they
alike,
do.
so I
Absolutely.
I like that casting, but one comment I have to make about looks is that Nat Wolff's character,
Mhm.
Rusty, and Lewis, I got them confused a little bit at the
Yeah.
beginning of the film. They don't look the same, but they are like, what do they call it? Like, what do the kids say these days? They were written by the same writer, they were cut by the
Oh, yeah.
same something like that. It's like they
Huh.
same archetype almost.
Yeah.
Like they
Well,
looked very
they both
similar
like
to me.
Stephen King. They established that.
Yeah, that's true. It's
Yeah.
like there's just something similar about both of them, and then after a while, I was like, "Oh, wait." Like, I was looking at him, and I
Right.
was like, "He doesn't look like the guy from, um,
I was kinda curious because
What's His
I
Name? The
know you're a
Wallflower?"
millennial,
Oh, go ahead.
if you'd heard of, Nat Wolff before.
Um, he in The Fault with Our Stars?
Yes, he was the blind kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know him that well.
Okay, so
Um
he was in a he and his brother were in a band called the Naked Brothers. Does that ring a bell?
Oh, you know what? I'm a little bit too old to
Okay.
have
Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly where you fit in there, but I think it was
Yeah,
also a
no,
TV
but
show
if
on Nickelodeon.
yes, like, if
Yeah.
I had been, I don't know, 6 or 7 years younger, then yes. I
Right.
remember when it was really big.
Yeah, was it right around the Hannah Montana, Jonas Brothers era? Is that
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
see, like, even the
yeah.
Jonas Brothers, like, there's people that I work with that are like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, they were the first concert I saw as a child," and I was like, "Oh, I was an adult," like but yeah, okay, I didn't realize that's who he was, like, till you just
Yeah.
said that, but
I had
I've
never
seen
heard
him
of
in a
the
lot of
Naked
things.
yeah, and I had never heard of him or the Naked Brothers until this, movie. And I heard about and he talks about it on the commentary track, so that's how I knew about that. But
Wow.
I
He
do
doesn't he
believe
doesn't give, like, lead singer energy, so that's kinda
really?
interesting, like,
Yeah.
in this movie anyway.
Yeah, I guess. But what's interesting though is I think I actually met his father. His father is Michael Wolff. He was the band leader of the Arsenio Hall show,
Oh,
and
wow.
back in those days, I was a music journalist, and I was at a album release party for his keyboardist Star Parodi. I'm pretty sure he was there, and that I said hello to him or whatever. I got a little chance to talk to him, but it was so long ago, I barely remember for sure if he was there. And this would
Well
have been before Nat was born. So
Yeah, like, I remember, that being, uh, that being a pretty popular show, but
mhm.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was a good band. And Jennifer Connelly, my favorites she has 2 of my favorite movies, Requiem for a Dream and House of Sand and Fog. I love both of those
Yeah.
movies.
Well, and I love Dark City, she was in that
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Is he let's see, I have to look up one thing. We'll come back to him because I don't wanna say the wrong thing, but, um, yeah,
To Nat
that's really interesting about Nat. I felt like he was in
yeah,
something else
well,
too.
right after Fault in Our Stars, he was in Paper Towns, which was also from a
Oh,
John Green
yeah.
novel. But, what else?
And his brother is Alex Wolff,
Alex
the
Wolff, yeah,
guy
he
from, Hereditary. And so they were
Oh,
both
yeah,
the
yeah,
Naked Brothers then,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, yes.
Wow, okay. Because I was watching this movie and I was like, "He looks like the guy from Hereditary." I had that thought. No idea that they were brothers, no idea that they were both in that
Yeah,
band,
no,
and, like, I mean, there just wasn't a lot of
exactly.
reason for me to watch, like, Nickelodeon back then, but
Well, I had seen Nat in the 3 movies that I mentioned, this one and Fault in Our Stars and Paper Towns, and I had
interesting.
heard him talk about his brother, but I'd never seen his brother, and then the brother was in a movie, um, where he plays a guy who's trying a kid who's trying to find he runs away from his, boarding school to look for, JD Salinger, and I can't remember what that was called. It
Wow.
wasn't Rebel in the Rye, that was a different one, that was with Nicholas Hoult. But anyway, that was the first time I saw Alex Wolff, and I'm like, oh yeah, I see the resemblance. He totally looks like
Man, when you look up when you look up Alex Wolff, it says an award-winning actor, musician, singer,
that.
and composer.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Both of
Who
them. They
knew
both.
that those kids would grow up to be so accomplished? Incredible. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Oh,
Um,
very cool.
but I also wanted to say though that as far as the where was I?
We're on like line 3 or 4 of your
Oh
favorite.
yeah, we're actually
Yeah.
on the. I skipped four. I'm on five, but the about a rewriting still. So one of the scenes that they added with Jennifer Connelly, she was not originally in the book signing scene, the party for the book release party.
Oh.
And that ended up, yeah, I know you always ask favorite scenes. That for me is my favorite moment in the movie. Absolutely, is
Mm.
when the mother goes up to get the daughter's autograph, and she hasn't. In case anyone is listening and who hasn't seen the movie, they haven't spoken in over a year because Samantha's mad at her mother for breaking up the marriage for cheating on her father, on her husband,
Mhm.
and she goes up and I love you so much, Sam. I'm so proud of you. And she's like, thank you. Enjoy the book. And she is so cold, and I've never seen anything like that before. I just love the delivery of
Golly.
that.
Yeah, it's a tough time if maybe if the parents had gotten divorced when they were younger, I think it's a
Mhm,
little bit easier. I mean, my parents divorced when I was young. I feel like in a lot
mhm.
of ways that was a lot easier for me. Whereas when you're a
Yeah,
teenager, that's like the most so much change is happening, in your own life. And then for that to be on top of it, I can kind of understand. And that sort of naiveness about relationships too.
yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of this, especially the Kate and Rusty stuff, is semi-autobiographical. And
Oh,
Josh Boone says that the ending of it when they get back together, that's just wishful fulfillment. That didn't have, his parents did divorce when he was younger, and he always fantasized that they would get back together. And he imagines that a lot of other kids of divorced parents would have that same kind of wish fulfillment. So that was why he did that.
yeah, and I feel like in a relationship, there's 2 different sides, right? And I do feel like there's some statistic about men and women divorcing and the guy in particular wanting it to go back to how it was, so
Mhm. Oh,
there's
really?
definitely some truth there. Yeah, I've heard that, like, that the most divorces are initiated, at least these days, by women.
Huh.
Which if that's the case, then yeah, then it would be more on the man's side that he would want it to go back to how it was, but I don't know much more about that. I'm definitely not a psychologist or qualified that much to talk about those
Yeah.
types of things, but that's something that I've heard. And certainly you can feel that he's the main character, right? That he's the writer, so that makes sense.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Well,
I
one of the
mean,
writers anyway.
yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said, I related more to the Rusty story, so to me, I think that's the main storyline, and the others on
Ah.
the side cares. But I see, obviously, Greg Kinnear's a bigger name, and so when if you look at the trailer, it seems like it's all about Greg Kinnear and Kristen Bell. So,
Yeah. I had a question about that. So there was only a couple times in the movie where I felt a little bit like the pacing of it either could have benefited from the movie being longer
mhm.
or perhaps if they were to cut a couple things out. I actually almost felt like Kristen Bell at some points felt a little bit additional. Did that ever feel that way to you, or is that just
Yeah,
in my
a lot
head?
of her stuff is improvised,
I
but
see,
all
I
her
see.
scenes are in the script. The thing that makes it seem so quick is that they only had her for one day. So
I see.
so
Okay,
they had
okay.
to shoot all of her,
Interesting.
yeah, they had to shoot all of her scenes in one day. I think it was like 10 pages or 12 pages. It was like their longest day. And yeah, so that's why there's one scene where Lily Collins is sitting there talking to her dad and she goes by. That's a cutaway from that one day. The rest of the cast besides Greg wasn't there on her day, on Kristen Bell's day.
That makes sense, and
Yeah.
plus her role is really I mean, it's like she hardly meets anybody else in the family, right? I
Right.
mean, because of the nature of their relationship,
Mhm.
obviously, but I think too, it's like, you could almost imagine the movie even without that character, and for some
Exactly.
reason, I always think of that when I watch movies, even, whether I can really, really enjoy the movie, but I don't know why. I always like wonder. I'm like, if I had to cut a scene or if I had an
Mm,
add a scene, where would I do that? And so that's what I was thinking about with her. And then the other scene like that for me, honestly, is the scene with Sam at the book party. Um,
mm.
or Kate, sorry, Kate,
Oh,
not
right.
um her overdose and stuff. To me, that felt
Yeah,
like that happened too quick almost.
it did. Yeah,
Like, it was like it almost felt like somebody that isn't familiar with that that subject matter because it just felt like it was too fast.
you
But I
know,
get it. They were trying to bring it back around. If it was like a TV show, they would have had more time to flesh that out, I think.
I actually reread the script this morning. I hadn't read it since we did it in storyboard before, and I can tell you the differences, the things that got cut. That mostly there was like a couple more scenes with Sam throwing herself at other guys, but there was also some stuff with Kate. Most of the cuts were with Rusty and Kate. They went
Mm,
on more dates. There was a scene where they went to a concert, and she runs away with some other guys to go get loaded with some coke, and they have a big fight about it. And we learn a lot more about her drug problems in that scene, and it's gone. It was
got it.
replaced. It was replaced basically by the very short scene where she meets Jennifer Connelly, and she goes off to the
Oh,
bathroom and starts looking for drugs.
I
It's a much
see.
shorter scene, but it was part of the cutting it for budget reasons, and then cutting the concert scene for budget reasons, and then
That makes
adding Jennifer
sense.
Connelly in because she wasn't in it enough. Um,
Yeah.
so it solved two problems, but you're right. It does seem like we do miss out. And there was another scene where we go into the closet with them, and we find out that they had sex 3 times, but the first time barely counted.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. It's pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, I it's not that I don't like the character of Kate, but I did feel
Right.
like maybe there was more opportunity to because I felt like the
Mhm.
the pill scene that felt very like a little bit cliche when it comes to
Yeah,
addiction. And I
yeah,
was kind of like, eh. And then later when she's running into someone's arms, I was like, whoa, that's a huge
right.
difference between that first scene and that scene. But the budget constraints make
Yeah,
total sense. Like it's
yeah,
way cheaper to film that than it would be to
yeah.
film,
And
at a big concert.
the actress Liana Liberato, she is one of my favorite actresses, and she really,
Oh, I wasn't
I
familiar with
a
her.
lot of her movies aren't that great, but she's always great in them.
Oh,
And
I just saw Totally Killer though
I
recently.
was
I
going to say,
like
yes, she
that.
was in Totally Killer. She was also in Scream 6, both of those from this
Oh,
year.
wow.
So she's in a Hulu show called Light as a Feather, and she's on another show on Peacock. I can't remember what that one's called.
Mm. There's
So,
definitely a Peacock thread, I feel like, because this is on Tubi, and then I saw that also you could watch it on Peacock. So
okay.
she must have some kind of deal with them or something.
But yeah,
Interesting.
her big breakout role. She started acting very young, and her big breakout role was in a movie called Trust. Have you heard of that
Oh, I
one?
don't think I've seen that.
With
No.
It was directed by David Schwimmer of Friends,
Oh,
Ross from
wow.
Friends, and it's about a 14-year-old girl who meets a guy online who's older than he says he's pretending that he's her age, and then they meet
Oh
up
my
in real
gosh.
life. And yeah, it's a very dark, very hard to watch um, rape drama,
Oh,
and
interesting.
but she is so amazing in it. And again, she's holding her own with some great actors. Clive Owen, Catherine Keener play her parents, and Viola Davis plays her therapist, and she's holding her own against those guys at
Wow.
just 14. She's just amazing.
It's interesting to me the way the women in the movie, like Lily Collins' character,
Mhm,
Kate, are sort of they have this like they're great actresses
mhm,
obviously, but they also like I think looks wise remind me of sort of like a TV movie, a CW type, really
mhm.
really pretty people is what I'm trying to say. And then I feel like Nat Wolff and Logan Lerman have that more like brooding, serious,
Mhm.
mysterious boy vibe to them.
Yeah, yeah,
Like both
uh-huh,
of them have that energy. Um it's just interesting. They seem almost like opposites, but yeah, I don't know. I don't
yeah.
know where I was going with that, just an observation.
Well, yeah, I mean, they are opposites. I love the fact that they don't get together at the end.
Yeah.
She has her little OD episode. She's sent away to rehab. She writes him a nice letter, and they are still in touch. There's this one little line when Jennifer Connelly rings the doorbell at the end. Rusty says, "Oh, that might be Kate. I invited her." So at least we know they're still in touch, but they're not going to stay together because they don't belong together. They are two opposites. Yes.
Yeah, it's like and I feel like that's a thing that happens when you're young, where
Hmm.
you meet these people that you kinda wanna save, especially if you're like a more
Yes.
introverted, shy
Fixers. Yeah.
person. You're like, "Oh, I can fix this person," and then
Mhm.
when you get older, you're like, "Wow, that was a bad idea, like, I'm not doing that anymore," you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But there's a naiveness of like, "Oh, they also don't fit into society. We have so much in common," but it's like, no, it's not a good fit.
Right. For Rusty, it
Yeah.
was a physical attraction, and his
Mhm.
father was pushing him, said, "You got to go have some adventures, so you'll have something to write about."
Yeah.
And for her, it was somebody to cling to help you because she saw him as a chance to pull her out and fix. She wanted to be fixed. He wanted to fix her,
Mhm.
and but that's not what a relationship is built on. So
Right, and there's a great line about that later in the
yeah.
movie where she's like, "I can't you can't fix me, I have to
Well,
fix me," which I was like, "Oh,
yeah.
bravo, film,"
Yeah.
for not perpetuating this idea that you can
Yeah.
fix people, I like that.
And I told you that the script that I wrote that had a character like Kate, same thing. I did not have them get together at the end. The producer who optioned the script, that's the only change he made me make. He says, "You got to have them get together at the end." It's like,
You're like, "No."
I
That's
didn't
funny.
want to, but if we were going to get it made, so I
Yeah.
had to do what he said.
We haven't talked about Lewis a ton, Logan Lerman, but
Right.
I had never seen The Perks of Being a Wallflower until it was during COVID and, participated in, like, everybody was kinda trying to watch
Yeah.
movies during that time, and I saw it and was completely like, this is so ignorant, but I was completely unprepared for how dark it was gonna get, and by the end of the movie, I was just like, "Oh, I wish I hadn't watched that when I'm already feeling kind of
Uh,
down because of
yeah.
COVID," but thought he was a really he brings such strong performances.
Yeah. Yeah. He
Yeah.
was also in the Percy
Mhm.
Jackson movies.
Oh, yeah, and he was really good in Fury and,
Mhm.
yeah, like, he's
Yeah,
really good.
I mean, I knew who the adult cast was, but the young cast really impressed me.
Yeah.
I was seeing all of them for the first time in this movie, except for
Yeah.
Liana. I'd already seen Trust.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I thought I thought he was playing a very not the same role, but a similar one in that, a kid that has a lot going on that you don't
Mhm.
know about until you get to
Yeah,
know him, like the things with his mother and her brain
yeah.
tumor, yeah.
I love the fact that it was his mother's death that finally pushed Sam to go see her mother.
Yeah, yeah,
That
she
was
realized through that.
that
I
was a
didn't even
nice
think about
touch.
that, but you're right,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because I mean, they already had first they're at the party and they have their little I'm not going to sign the book or I'm not talking to you at the party, but then as a family four of them go to rescue Kate together. That's the first time this family has been together in 3 years.
Mhm.
And they're on this adventure to go rescue somebody and we also know the little story that Kinnear tells that Bill tells about Samantha went and borrowed that book that she thought was your favorite. She obviously misses you. So we see little bits and
Yeah.
pieces breaking down for her, but I think it was the other, her boyfriend's mother's death that really pushed her back.
Well, yeah, and you touched on something with Bill too, like, he did that. He also finally admits to Samantha that he also had infidelity in his past.
Yeah, and that's another one of the ideas that Greg Kinnear came up with, and it got into a rewrite.
I think that was a nice
Yeah,
touch because
yeah,
I feel like that's a little bit true to form too, that, like, when there's a divorce, not gonna say names, but
uh-huh.
I know that it's common for parents to kind of it's like they're going through a lot, so they want their kids to be on their side, and so he, like, left out certain information to kind of paint her mother as the bad guy, which I think
Mhm.
Jennifer Connelly tries to point out a few times in the movie until he finally, like, breaks down and admits it at the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Uh, and he defends himself. He says, "I'm not actually saying anything bad about you." And she's like, "Yeah, but when you don't move on with your life, you're moping and you're setting a place for me at the table. that reminds her all the time of what I did to you, and
Yeah, and
in
then
fact, what
leaving out that, cleverly leaving out the fact that
yeah.
he's also cheated on her.
Oh
It's
my
like
god,
it's
that's the
basically like, "I'm the perfect romantic dad that's, wonderful and your mom is horrible," and it's like and then at the
yeah,
end, she finds out and she's so betrayed, but,
I
and I feel like that's so normal for kids to, like, realize their parents are human and for that to feel like a betrayal.
oh, yeah. We never think of what our parents' life was like when they first got together. It's so
Yeah,
bizarre. It's because it's before we were born, and,
right.
and we don't remember that we don't know that they had other lives, but when he reveals that to her, she says, "I can't believe you let me hate her,"
Yeah.
and that is such a powerful line too,
Mhm. And
you know?
I'm just gonna say relatable as
Yeah.
someone that experienced divorce that
Mhm.
that did happen, and it did take a long time for one of the parents to admit that they were doing that, and say, like, "Sorry," and, like, kinda walk it
Yeah,
back, but it takes time, everyone's kind of growing and changing, and
yeah.
yeah.
And, I did notice that that line wasn't in the original script, so that again came out of
Oh,
rewrites, and
another
that's another thing that I was trying to say about rewrites is that,
mhm,
a lot of people, well, I don't know about a lot of people. For me, when I first started writing and I would have to rewrite, rewriting for me used to be just about, well, fixing typos and changing a line of dialogue. But no, you can, this shows you how you can really elevate things, but just by rethinking, adding just the right line,
yeah,
or just adding a different person to the scene, because Jennifer Connelly wasn't initially in that scene at the book party. So not
mhm,
only would you not have had that confrontation with Sam, you wouldn't have had that whole moment where she's sitting there at the party with Bill and talking about the thing that you just said, where he says, "Oh, I guess I was picking your books and I wasn't paying attention to you." That wasn't in the script because she wasn't at that party.
interesting.
That's all part of the
Wow,
rewrite, and she didn't go with them to rescue, Kate, and because she wasn't in the scene at the party, so she wasn't in any of that, and
wow.
just a little bit of rewriting just made so much it just made it so much better.
Yeah,
So,
I agree, yeah.
yeah.
I think, yeah, it's like you're revisiting the material enough times to think like, what would make all these storylines fit together
Mhm.
more? What would make them tighter, more connected? Yeah.
And it's also a great example of how to get really good feedback and know what to do with it. I mean, when you hire an actor, they're not looking at the whole story usually. They're just looking,
Mhm.
because their job is to play a character, and if
Right.
you haven't given them enough to go on, they're going to ask questions, and it's going to force you to uh, expand the character a little bit, and it's going to force you to think about things that you missed, and that's what
Yeah.
happened here a lot.
Wow. That's really cool.
The last line that I singled out was, after Rusty has his little spiral after he gets beat up and everything, and he stops
Yeah.
writing, and he says, "You can't make me write, Dad." And Greg Kinnear says, "I won't have to. You're a writer. You'll do it yourself." And
Mm.
that's such a great line, because there are so many people who talk about writing and they say, "I'm going to get to my novel one day," or I'm reading a lot of books on writing. I'm reading all the how to write a screenplay in 24 hours, uh,
Yeah.
or 30 days or whatever. Those people never actually write. You can't call yourself a writer unless you're actually writing. And we didn't mention that initially I picked this movie for this particular time, because it's coming up on Thanksgiving. Are you going to actually publish it on Thanksgiving?
I can
Okay.
if you like.
And it's
Or
not
right
necessarily,
before even,
yeah,
like,
or right before,
it'll
yeah.
still kind of be along that vein,
Right.
yeah.
And I said it's not exactly a Thanksgiving movie, but it does start at a Thanksgiving dinner,
I
and then it
I did
ends
think about that when I was
at the
watching it for
yeah,
sure.
it ends with the Thanksgiving a year later, and so that's a nice little bookend. And but I also just realized this morning, this is November. November. Have you ever heard of NaNoWriMo?
Mm-mm.
NaNoWriMo is a National Novel Writers Month. Every November, it's a challenge, where
Oh,
people try to write a first draft of a new novel in just 1 month, in the month of November. So,
interesting. Okay, I did not know about that. Wow.
and writers know about it, and so since this is a movie about writers, it's also appropriate that we would be talking about it in November.
Wow,
That
double yeah, I definitely thought about the Thanksgiving thing because not a
yeah.
lot of movies take place during Thanksgiving.
Now I know.
It's like it's not like Christmas where you can at
Mhm,
least like other parts of the world celebrate it. I mean,
yeah,
Thanksgiving is unique to America. It's got a complicated history, obviously.
mhm.
Like there's many reasons why there's not a lot of Thanksgiving movies. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. We so we talked a little bit about Christian Bell, but I can tell you a quick little story.
Sure.
I told you that my script had a character that was a Kate-like character. She was a binge drinker and alcoholic,
Mhm.
and I didn't know who Kristen Bell was at the time. She was
Oh.
still shooting Veronica Mars, and I was living in the movie is set in San Diego. I was living in San Diego,
Oh, wow.
and Veronica Mars was shot in San Diego, and I didn't even know who she was or what the show was. But I had optioned it, and the producer was asking me who I thought we should send it out to, and I was giving him suggestions. And then I rented a movie that she was in, where she played like the daughter of the vice president, and she's kidnapped, and so it's a much darker character than you're used to seeing her play. And
Mm.
because she's being held hostage and everything, and she's screaming
Yeah.
and sweating and everything, trying to escape. And that was the first I saw of her, and I noted what her name was, and I was going to call my producer to tell him, hey, we should send it to her. Just as I was reaching for the phone to call him, the phone rings. It's my producer. He says, hey, you'll never guess what. I just was at a charity event and I met this agent, and she represents this actress named Kristen Bell, and she wants us to send her the script.
Wow. He's
Gets even
definitely
better.
a Kristen Bell type. I would think
Yeah,
the other person that I kind of think of when I think of a character like this, I think because of her show would be someone like Anna Faris.
yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But it gets her. So this was before the days where you could send out PDFs. You actually had to mail. You actually had
Oh
to mail
gosh.
physical copies of the scripts. So I had a copy of the script. I was driving out to the post office to mail it to the agent, and I lived in like a big cul-de-sac neighborhood. There's
Mhm.
only one road out of it, and as I'm going down that road out of that, I see all the grip trucks and the location signs, and there's a shoot. There's filming going on there. And I look at the location sign to see what it is. It's Veronica Mars, which at that time I had never heard of. I passed the Veronica Mars shoot. I go to the post office. I mail the script. I come back. I look up what is Veronica Mars, and I see, oh my God, Kristen Bell. I just passed. I just drove past her to go mail a script to her agent in Los Angeles.
Wow.
It was so funny. Needless to say, she passed on the script, but
Oh no. Oh
I
well.
did hear later her husband's podcast. Have you ever listened to Dax Shepard?
I
Uh,
have not.
he has a really good podcast, and sometimes she's on it. I don't remember if she mentioned this or if he mentioned it, but I think that was like the only character she ever did, the one that I saw her in, that was really that kind of dark kind of a thing. And she just didn't like having to go to that place and then bring it home with her. And so
Yeah, makes
she's
sense.
never done a part like that since then. So that's why she passed on it. I mean, she didn't
Oh,
tell us why,
interesting.
but that's got to be why, because
Yeah.
this was not, this was not Frozen. It was not the Good Place. What else has she
Yeah.
been in?
She clearly has like a
Yeah,
brand
he
now that
definitely has a different brand. What
yeah.
was the one? She's a fanboys. Did you see that one? She was great in that.
No, I haven't seen that.
And
I think of her as like, you know, funny
yeah,
and light and stuff like that. So for sure her brand has stuck.
and so the reason I would say that I would not cut her scenes from this movie is she's essentially comic relief.
That's true, and it is a
Those
heavy
are the
movie.
Yeah, those are really the funny scenes, and they're just about being funny. Um, she's cheating on her. She's married and has kids, and
Mhm.
we see that all the other characters are having problems with their relationships, but we're dealing with them sort of. They're broken, and she's just coming along doing funny stuff, and yet there's got to be something wrong with her. And if he wanted to, Josh Boone could have delved into her character more, and we could have found out what is her problem. Why is she doing this? But
I kind of felt like it was also meant to be ironic that he's like
yeah,
so mad at his ex-wife and like, how dare you do this to me and all this stuff. And then he's participating in a relationship like that himself. Like,
oh yeah, you know what? I never because I'm a guy, I would never think that.
yeah, it's like he doesn't, it's like interesting the way he compartmentalizes. Like his wife betrayed him, but
Yeah,
he has no problem helping this lady betray
right.
her husband. I mean, it almost feels like a tit for tat or something. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have a lot of, like, because I think it was such a small film, and like you said, it didn't show in a lot of theaters. I didn't have a lot of, quick facts to share,
Oh
but
yeah, I forgot about that. Go
I
ahead.
did have the only line that I had was that, there's a lot of well-known writers that are mentioned whose books are shown reading, including Flannery O'Connor,
Mhm.
Richard Ford, uh, Joan Didion, Raymond Carver, and most notably Stephen
Stephen
King.
King,
Because
yeah.
I did not realize, because obviously there's that scene where Stephen King calls him, and
Mhm.
he knows his dad, I guess Rusty. Um, but I didn't realize that really was his voice.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know why, I just decided watching it, I'm like, "That can't be Stephen King." Like, it's somebody, like,
No,
doing a Stephen King impression, but it's him.
yeah, the history is that Josh Boone grew up his parents were very religious, and he wasn't allowed to read Stephen King. So
Oh,
he had to hide Stephen King books inside book covers from Christian books. And he was
that's
such a big
great.
fan, and he was such a big fan at a very young age that he took some of his Stephen King books, put them in a box, and sent them to Stephen King, asking him to sign them. And he didn't even have an
Aw.
address. He just knew that he lived in Bangor, Maine, so he just wrote Stephen King, Bangor, Maine, and it got to him. And King wrote back a really nice long letter encouraging him to write and everything and to sign the books.
Wow.
And his parents, Josh's parents, were so impressed with that they lifted the ban on Stephen King.
That's so nice. That's such a nice story.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Nice. Well, is there anything else that we haven't touched on in regards to this film?
Oh, probably. Uh,
Yeah, that's true. That's a very dangerous question, I guess, when I think about it. But anything that you wanted to
I
discuss?
it's funny. I missed the one thing that Josh Boone is the most embarrassing. Well, not so the scene where he's Rusty loses his virginity in the closet.
Mhm.
That actually was exactly out of his life, out of Josh
Oh
Boone's
my
life.
gosh,
That
that is
was
kind of funny.
exactly how he loved. So Kate, there was a real Kate in his life, and she was named Kate.
Oh,
And
interesting.
and that's I think another reason why that stands out to me as the more the more dominant storyline is because
Maybe the
I guess
more real
I feel
relationship
that
too. Yeah.
authenticity to it.
Yeah.
Um, but he talks about how he was so meticulous about designing the room. You know, he had to make for on the set that he had to make sure that all the Stephen King books on the bookshelf were in the same order that they were in his actual room when it happened. And the commentary is really funny because it's Josh Boone and Nat Wolff, and Josh is so when that scene comes and Liana Liberato is taking her clothes off and dragging them into the closet. Josh is talking about the books and you see how the book is there and Nat's just laughing. He's like, dude, there's a half naked underage girl on the screen. Nobody's looking at the books.
Mm.
And he did say that he was when they were filming that scene he was because it was so true to his life that he couldn't even watch the video playback. He had to leave the set. He like practically didn't direct the scene because it was so real to him.
Yeah.
um, I think that's pretty amazing. And I also, because I mentioned the storyboard group, one of the critics, I forgot to mention that I was probably the only one in the group who even liked the script. We had about 20 or 30 people in the group, and
Oh,
everybody kind of
interesting.
hated it. And for a lot of various different reasons. And one of them is, I guess a lot of people just really don't like that structure. But
Mhm.
there was somebody who kind of complained that the women characters, especially the younger ones, were a little bit too much of a male writer's fantasy of what it's like to get girls, like a manic pixie dream girl kind of thing. And I
Mhm.
thought it was so interesting because I totally recognized Kate as being similar to girls that I've known. Um, that I've written about in my script, and so
Mhm.
I didn't find that a stretch at all. And I mean, and it's also made clear that Samantha is just very broken and traumatized, and she's deliberately putting up walls,
Yeah.
not letting a real. I mean, she's very open about it. I'm not going to let a real relationship in. She says to Rusty at one point, avoid love at all costs. So
Yeah.
it's understandable, and the script isn't saying that. Hey, look at the guys are going to get girls throwing themselves at them all the time. It's easy. No, he's saying these girls are broken, and
Yeah.
these are broken relationships. This is why Samantha ends up with somebody who's good for her. This is why um, Rusty and Kate don't work out.
Yeah.
Um, so I think. I found that interesting that it was attacked in my little group for being unrealistic about the women female behavior, and yet that particular storyline was so true to the writer's life. It wasn't fantasy at all. It was exactly how it happened.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you could say that it happened, but it is told under the perspective, maybe, of the male character a little bit more than the female one,
Yes.
you know?
Well, yeah,
So I could see it that way, because I think in some ways it's like, yeah, it's up to interpretation, right? Their behavior, even if
right.
so maybe that's what they meant more. I
Yeah,
don't know.
and I think the complaint actually may have been more about Sam, but like I said, Sam's explaining herself to us why she's like that. I mean, it's traumatizing, and people react to trauma in different ways. Some people
True.
will go down a self-destructive spiral. That's kind of
Mhm.
what drug addiction is, I think,
Yeah.
as well. So I think
Yeah.
Kate and Samantha are very similar.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Rusty's story is told from the male point of view, but Samantha's is told from the female point of view.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's. I'm debating whether or not I should tell another story that's really all deeply involved in my own personal life.
Oh, I mean, whatever you're comfortable with.
I almost didn't. I never even associated this movie with this particular person from my past. There was a Kate that I had a big crush on when I was in junior high and high school. Uh, we did not have a relationship like they do in the movie. I was always way too. I'm so much like Rusty. I was very too shy. I would never talk to her. I do have a picture of her of me dancing with her at my bar mitzvah. I don't know how that happened. I have no memory of it. And the only time I remember talking to her, I was having a party in my senior year, and I wanted to invite her, but I was too shy. And then she came up to me and said, "Hey, I heard you're having a party. Can I come?" But she brought a
Oh,
date. So
nice.
but she brought a date,
Oh.
and yeah, and nothing happened like in the movie, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, because again, later I found out that she everybody has their own demons, and she might have turned into. I didn't know this about her at the time, but she could have very well been a Kate as well, because in fact, after like 20 years after high school, she ended up murdering her mother
Oh my god, that's horrible.
and tried to pin it on her
Ooh.
boyfriend.
Yeah, definitely came from a very troubled background. I mean, you would have
Yeah,
been in
so
danger.
I
Jeez,
know. So it was a
yikes.
good thing that nothing ever happened with me and her. So,
Yeah.
and the
But
girl,
interesting how, like, yep, the parallel being that as a kid, you can't really tell, like,
yes,
there's this weird thing that happens in school where you can't really tell, like, how much is going on in someone's life, like,
mhm,
in the way that, like, as an adult, you're like, "Oh, like, I'm gonna steer clear of that person." You end up coming
yeah,
into so much contact with people that you wouldn't outside of school, you know?
yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
can watch this movie and I think, gee, I wish I would have had that kind of an opportunity with that girl, like Rusty did with Kate. But then look what who knows what could have happened.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So
he
now
does
I'm
get
putting
beat up later, yeah.
yeah, now I'm more like Samantha, and I'm building walls, and I'm not letting anyone
Yeah.
in.
Although
But
I will say the only thing with Samantha is I understand her being broken, or her view on
mhm,
relationships is bad, but I do maybe what the people in your group are talking about is, like, there does seem to be a pattern of when you're portraying a woman character as
mhm,
broken or frustrated, that is a lot about their promiscuity, and I
mhm.
think that part is, like, maybe not true to life. I mean, I do think people can be, in lots of relationships, whether they're traumatized or not. Maybe that's what
Yeah,
bothered them. I don't know.
yeah, it could have been a little over the top. I see that with Sam acting out. In fact, like I said, some of the scenes that were cut were more of Sam with other guys, and that
Mm,
they ended up getting cut. So we really just see her talking to the one guy when we first meet her, and she
yeah.
goes up to his dorm room, and
Yeah.
then
But it's
and
like
then
you
we
can
see
have
her
a
as
one night stand without it having this baggage
yeah,
attached to it. That's
we see her
probably the
going
thing.
to talk to the guy in the band, but she doesn't. We don't see what happens with that, and we see her trying to pick up the Mormon, which was funny,
Mhm,
and she gets shot down, and then the rest of her story is all with Lou, so
mhm.
she's already gotten over that promiscuity, I guess.
Yeah. I think that does play a little bit into male fantasy of, like, if a woman is acting like this,
Sure.
there's a sad reason and it's gonna stop,
Yeah.
like, once I enter her life, which is, like, probably not true,
Yeah.
although it
Yeah.
could be, and
Yeah.
that I imagine that's probably the part
And
that maybe they were thinking
yeah,
of.
and that's the thing that Rusty and Kate are fighting about in the scene that got
Yeah.
cut. So,
Oh,
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, so that probably would've shined more light on that. Interesting.
yeah.
Well, are we at the last couple of 2 questions, or was there
Yeah.
more that we okay, sure. Okay, so if you had to summarize, what is it about this movie that made you choose it today? Like, why what is it that really sticks with you?
Well, like I said, I think I kind of answered that already.
Oh, for sure.
The high school crush the wish fulfillment, the fantasy element of seeing how it works out, but also I thought the maturity of not letting it work out, given the dynamics of those two particular characters. So many lessons about writing, so much talk about writing. Since I like writing as well, I like that, and this is such a good family. Well, I'll wait till you ask the next question before I
Okay.
go there.
Yeah, like, what is your pitch? Put yourself back in
Well,
the shoes of pitching again, and
okay.
what's your pitch?
My joke answer to that is, and this is what I wrote in that article, is Stuck in Love is about a dysfunctional family of writers that I wish had been mine, because I do like how they stick up for each other. They do support each other. They have their differences. They speak their mind about things.
Mhm.
But they all are on the same page, so to speak. They all know what they all share that passion of what they do,
Yeah.
and I never got any encouragement from my family at all. So,
Mhm.
and that's something that I find appealing about it. And you know,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
by the way, this article that I wrote, Josh Boone had seen that too, and he reblogged it on his Tumblr, and it ended
Oh,
up being the one with the most hits on my Five Sprockets page.
wow, that's
So
great.
so don't be surprised if he listens to this podcast, because he seems to follow me around whenever I talk about him.
Okay, I'll make sure to share all the tags I can. And you plug it too. Well, that's great, Danny. Well, thank you so much, for coming back, and for discussing this movie that it's kind of like a hidden gem, wouldn't have
Yeah,
found it otherwise. But appreciate having you on, and look forward to having you back soon.
thank you.